You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Deciding if I wanted to take my career to the next level into going into management. And so I just knew who the experts in the field were, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to find them out. I'm going to seek them out and find them and talk to them.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. This is another episode of Dave Bullis Podcast. Do you like this spooky Halloween music? This is Ennio Morricone's, one of his soundtracks for the movie The Thing, the original John Carpenter The Thing. I think all his work is fantastic, and the soundtrack for The Thing is freaking amazing. But I want to keep this up since it's Halloween, it's October, you know. So before we get to today's show, I just want to say thank you to Anthony Hayes from Me, Myself, and I Radio at memyselfandiradio.com. Anthony runs a fantastic podcasting Facebook group, and I've actually learned a lot of stuff right off the bat, so I want to say thank you to him for including me on that group. I also want to say thank you to everyone who rates, reviews, and recommends this podcast, because now we're up to 19 reviews on iTunes. We went from 12 last week to 19 this week. That is fantastic. So I want to say thank you very much for everyone who has rated, reviewed, and recommended the show. I'm also closing on 4,000 Twitter followers. So, once I reach 4,000, I should do something special. I just don't know what yet. But I want to say thank you very much. And I would, the more that we can, share this podcast and get the recommendations up, the more it helps everybody out. And speaking of helping everybody out, a lot of questions I get are about, Dave, how do I, take things to the next level? And, some of the emails I get are like that as well. They want to know, what does it take to move to the next level? Well, to be honest, I don't have that answer, but maybe my guest today does. So my guest today is a literary manager and script consultant, and she runs her own consulting agency, and we discussed that very question. What does it take to make it to the next level? And we all know what that next level is. And that's all really very subjective. And I want to make sure everyone knows that, because if you haven't written a script before, your next level is writing a script. If you've written 10 scripts and your next level is you want to get representation. If you have representation, your next level is you want to get it made by an A-list cast and crew. Sounds simple, right? This is episode 132 with guest Whitney Davis.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey, Whitney, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It's funny, we were trying to get a hold of each other for a while now. We just keep missing each other, but I'm so glad we can finally connect.
Me
because
too.
I saw your bio, and you have a really, really cool bio, and I said I got to get Whitney on the podcast.
Well, thanks. It's been quite a journey, that is for sure.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to ask about that journey, and I wanted to ask, Whitney, how did you get started, in the whole literary management business, and how did you get involved in the consulting business? So basically what I'm asking is, where did this whole journey start?
Oh, my gosh. That's a crazy story. To make it short, because it obviously has been a 10-year journey, essentially I was in the right place at the right time with the right person is how this whole journey started. About 10 years ago, I had moved to Los Angeles with zero aspirations to be in the entertainment industry. It wasn't even really on my radar. And I had always thought I was going to be a novelist, actually, that if I ever really sat down and put pen to paper, which I think is something that a lot of people struggle with, actually getting started, that if I ever ever actually got started that I was going to write a book. And I was actually at a party, and this woman approached me, and I didn't know who she was or what she did. And she asked me what I was doing with myself. And I was like, well, I'm actually raising a baby. And she's like, but no, honey, really? I mean, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, maybe I'll write a book. And so she started asking me about it. And when I told her about this concept for my book, her face just dropped. And she was like, I'm going to have my assistant contact you tomorrow. And I was like, what is that? And so her assistant actually did come over the next day. And I kid you not, this never happens, but with a stack of TV pilot screeners, like DVDs, and a stack of TV pilots. And they said, forget your book concept. We're turning it into an original television series. And she happened to be a TV lit agent with William Morris at the time. And so that is how I got my start. And to segue into the other part of it, I started in the television business, and then the writer's strike happened. And so people started, once I was out of work, people started bringing me their scripts, just being like, hey, can you look this over since you already kind of broke in? And I was like, sure. And so I did it for free for a while because I didn't know any better. And then I was like, maybe I should charge and people will go away. And then it just got worse. And so I just did script development for a long time. And then crazy enough, again, this just organically occurred. Some of my clients that were starting to do well in the contest asked if I would consider managing them, and I said no for a long time. And then it was just like I was actually already kind of orchestrating meetings, and so I finally just said, what the heck, and I just jumped in with both feet. So that is how I got to where I am today, in a nutshell. It's very crazy.
So when you first moved to LA, was there a reason that you moved to LA? Because I know you said you didn't want to be in the entertainment business at that point.
Yeah.
But
so my husband at the time, he was there for grad school, and so he had come to UCLA to get his master's degree, and I actually had applied to be an English teacher at Santa Monica High School, but then I found out I was pregnant, so I just decided the baby was coming in December, which was going to be in the middle of the year, so I just actually decided not to teach at all. And again, it was just the perfect timing that right after the baby was born and I was kind of had my feet back on, up again, that I ran into this woman and started developing my original TV series and all that. So it was just, and it was hilarious because I was so green. I didn't know anything. I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. But now looking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what an amazing opportunity. People would have killed to be in my position. And I was just kind of doodling along like it was no big deal. But now looking back at it, I'm like, wow, what an amazing blessing and opportunity to just not have been afraid. I just didn't know anything and I wasn't jaded. So I wasn't afraid to open up my mouth and say, oh yeah, here's my idea. And I essentially pitched her without knowing I was pitching her. So that's what I always tell people, that they just need to do their pitches. When they pitch, they just need to do their pitches like they're having a conversation, because whoever they're pitching is just a human being like you and me. All they want is to hear a great story. And I think people get really nervous at the thought of pitching, but, the other person listening to your pitch isn't like a unicorn. They just, they're just a regular human who wants to find great material. And so I just say, hey, the best way to pitch is just having a conversation. That's the best advice I can give on that, because that's how it happened for me. I just didn't even know it, but it was happening. So it was great.
It's like what Dan Harmon said about, he gave advice to pitching, and his advice was, he's like, when you're ever going out there and you tell your friends about some movie and they go, oh, should I see that movie? And you say, yeah. And then your friend says, well, what happens? Well, okay, let me tell you what happens in the movie. He says that right there is how you should pitch to people.
Exactly.
He goes, just telling them about this really cool thing.
Yes. And I think that there's so much pressure these days for how to pitch. And I really think there is no, formula, if you would say. I think everybody's so individual that I did Great American Pitch Fest in May, and I was really amazed. I sat and probably listened to 150 pitches, and there was a real big difference to the ones who were pitching comfortably and knew their story well, as opposed to those who were trying, I felt to follow a very formulaic pitch that they're I'm not doing this. And, I could just tell that they were tied up in, am I giving them the right information in the right sequence, I guess. So, yeah, that's just something that I really love to talk to people about, is just pitching bravely, not being afraid to just say what they want to say and not worrying about a formula or anything like that. So I love it.
So are you still working with the agent or manager?
No, actually. I mean, we are still on great terms, but so we kind of went through the pitching process of pitching my series at the time, and they had married me. For a lot of writers that don't know this, I think that a lot of, getting into the TV industry is, or any, whether it be feature film or TV, is just like really understanding the business aspect of being a writer. So, I was like, oh, I'm going to sell this pilot, blah, blah, blah. But really, it was just, when we went on our general meetings, they just wanted to see what kind of a writer I was and what my personality was. And so I thought I just had all of my expectations, like, turned upside down. So anyway, after we pitched it and it didn't get bought, but I got hired, we went through that. And then once the writer strike happened and I had the baby and things were getting crazy, I decided to just go with the script consulting, and we just kind of parted ways amicably, but it was just because I kind of decided not to go back into a writer's room per se, because it was just more amenable to being a mom doing the script consulting thing. And plus, I get so much satisfaction out of helping people develop their concepts. Like, I really love that. So I think that's why management was a natural segue for me, because there's so much of that in managing someone and helping them, get to the next level and developing their ideas and being a sounding board. So to answer your question, no, I'm not with that agent anymore, but it just was a natural kind of break, and we're still on great terms, and I see her every so often, and she's at CAA now, actually, so she even moved since then, but yeah.
So you brought about moving to the next level. As as some of the questions, as you could see, that came in, Whitney, I think that's a hot button issue for a lot of people. Yes. Is moving to that next level. Yes. So spoiler alert for everyone listening. That's some of the questions that have come in. But before we get to that, I just wanted to ask, Whitney, you have worked under people like Steve Kaplan and Jen Grisani, Lee Jessup. By the way, they've all been on the podcast. So it's small world.
Those guys.
So how did you end up working, with a lot of these people in the field? Because these are all, well-known people. Again, you've worked with Steve Kaplan, Jen Grisani, Lee Jessup, John Truby, Chris Vogler. How did you end up working and meeting with all these people? You know what?
Honestly, I sought them out. Like, I was just like, if I'm going to do this and I want to learn and, learn from the best. And so I just made an effort, to save, like, this was kind of in that journey where it was kind of this weird in-between period where I was doing the script consulting and was kind of deciding, like, if I personally wanted, I guess I'm kind of an entrepreneur in that degree, just deciding if I wanted to take my career to the next level into going into management. And so I just knew who the experts in the field were, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to find them out. I'm going to seek them out and find them and talk to them. And so essentially I just kind of made like a business plan that I was going to save up certain amounts of money and like invest in myself to go to their classes and meet them and start relationships with them. And so that, I think, is part of why I am where I am today, because I wasn't afraid, and I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to just kind of get in front of these people and meet them and talk to them. And so, and then it started being crazy that, like, it's such a small world, and now that I'm kind of getting into that world with them, like, I see them everywhere. Like, I was just with Jen in New York. We were doing a conference together, and I see Lee Jessup, and like I'm helping Steve with his comedy class in January. So that's how I did it. Was I just took the initiative myself and went out, was like, I want to be associated with the people who know what they're doing, and I just took the initiative to go find them and to build relationships with them, actually. So that's how it happened. I just wasn't afraid, I guess. So I hope that answers the question.
So, with the advent of the internet, I think it's made, everything a little easier and a little harder at the same time. And one of the things that's made a little easier is finding these people, because, all the people that we just mentioned, they all have websites.
Yes, they do.
And so did you find them through their websites, or did you bump into them maybe at a conference?
No, I've bumped into them all at conferences. I mean, I knew people in the industry, and I had just been hearing about these people. And so, like, I met them all in person. I made an effort. And again, this is hard if you're not local to LA, because a lot of these people are local to LA. But I made the effort to, go to the conferences, to make sure I went up to them afterwards and spoke to them. And, now I really consider them friends and colleagues, because I was truthful. I was like, hey, like, I want to learn from you. Like, I want to know what to do. But for people who aren't local to LA, all these people, Jen, Lee, Steve, John Truby, Chris Vogler, Robert McKee, all these people I just say the best thing that you can do is access their information. They have podcasts, they have, online seminars, they have these things. Like, these people know what it takes to get to the next level. They are the experts. And I say, if you can't meet them in person, like, tweet at them, email them. They do phone consults. I know that Lee does for sure. And, like, just soak up everything you can from them, because they definitely know what they're doing. I do consults as well. So, I think you just got to put yourself out there and, like, make it known. Like, I always tell the writers that I work with, like, make it known within the first 5 minutes of a conversation that you want to write and you want to do this, and this is what your goal is. Like, I think it's important to speak that stuff out into the universe to, like, let the world know, because it's like, if you don't speak it, how would anybody know it? You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot to making verbal commitments and letting people know that that's your goal, because they can hold you accountable to it and ask, So I think that that's an important aspect of a writing career.
Definitely. And I definitely think also, finding out who you actually want to talk to and zeroing in on those people is really important as well.
Yes. And in terms of, like, I think one of the questions that the guy asked, there was a guy that was like, maybe he wasn't local to LA, but he asked about queering. He's like, is that my only option? Like, I'm not in LA. And, like, I always say, even if you can make one trip out to LA and go to, like, one of the big conferences like Great American Pitch Fest or Story Expo, or like, I know there's others that are like American Film Market or any of those things. Like, so many people are at those, and just even making face-to-face contact for 5 minutes and handing them your business card and making a contact, like, that's enough there then and of itself to, like, send a query. And, like, agents and managers show up to these things, like to film festivals and all these things. So I think that a cold query can be a little hard and difficult in terms of taking things to the next level. But I'm just like, man, if you can invest and take one trip out to LA, like, a year, like, it can do one, and you go to the right event and, make sure you talk to the right people, like, it can radically change the trajectory of your career. Absolutely. 100%.
We were talking about, you went to the management side, of the business, and I wanted to ask, Whitney, what are some of the things that you have seen, and that sort of, like, is as what I'm trying to say is sort of like a normal thing that you see, like the most common error screenwriters make, is what I was trying to say.
Oh gosh, that's a really tough question, because I think everyone obviously is so individual, but I think that one of the common errors that will turn either an agent or a manager off is just the way in which they go about contacting them, actually. Like, you really need to research the agent or manager that you're trying to talk to. I know that one of the big things among agent and managers, often if you're sending a query letter that you're sending to a lot of different people, a lot of times, like, the person sending in either the query for their film or their TV show or their literary novel will spell the agent's name wrong or spell the manager's name wrong, and that is, like, the number one turnoff. Like, you're not even paying attention to what you're doing, So number one, I think, is just paying attention to detail and showing that you're serious. I think another thing that they look for, like, which is crazy, is typos. Like, they'll forgive some, but they're just like, if an email is just chock full of typos, they're just like, and these people want to write? Like, what is this, So I think that those detail-oriented things are one of the things. The other thing is, it's good to be persistent. Like, I think it's always good to follow up with an agent or manager, but you have to understand that most agents and managers are absolutely drowning in either scripts or books to read, like drowning all the time. Like, they're always playing catch up. And so a major turnoff is, like, if you tell someone, hey, thank you so much for submitting your script or your book, like, expect, to hear from me in 4 to 6 weeks. And an agent, an amateur writer who isn't aware of how things operate, they they get antsy and they want to know. And I totally understand that because I've been there. But if they start emailing like every day or every 2 days, which has totally happened, like, have you read my book? Have you read my script? Have you done this? Have you done that? Like, we're just like, forget it. Like, if they can't be that absolutely tends to drive agents and managers crazy, and they just, they won't respond. Like, they just won't. They're just like, if these people can't be patient, like, I'm not, I'm not. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a particular, like, standard protocol in terms, I guess, of behavior or just general manners, that those two minor things can be enough to turn an agent or a manager off, unfortunately, I think. So those are kind of my two big things I think of, which aren't even material related, which is like a whole other thing. So those are like actionable items that people can look for. Like, don't send a query with typos. Don't bother the agents, managers. And then there's the material side of things in terms of the content they send, which is like a whole different ball game that we could talk about, but I don't know how much time we have.
No, that sounds great. If you have the time, I'd love to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of I think that, so to make this super quick, I think in terms of the content people send, some people, you've got like two types of people, and I don't mean this negatively at all, but you've got your people who are just like, my show is great, it's completely original, it's the next blah, 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 which is totally awful to say. People are like, sometimes they're like, I'm the next J.K. Rowling, or I'm the next Quentin Tarantino. It's like, don't, they'll say that in their things. It's like, do not compare yourself to the greatest people out there. That's just a no-no. But in terms of like the material, like, I think a lot of it is people just, they want to be a writer, and I just tell people, like, sometimes people will come to me and they want to be managed, and I'm like, well, okay, let me see what you have. And really, it comes to an aspect of like, are these people ready to be, is their material ready to be shopped? And the things that I look for to make sure that either a script or a TV show or a novel is ready to be shopped, it's like, is the story structure there? Like, because a lot of times it's like they don't even have, like, I'll read through it and like key components of what makes a story are missing. Like, there's no catalyst. It's like, what's the inciting incident in this story? Or, there is no all is lost moment where the character really comes to this deep, dark place where they have to rise back to the top again. So if that's missing, it's like, there's nothing, I can't manage that. Now, on my consulting developmental side, like, yes, that's what I'll work with you to fix. But in terms of, are you ready? Another thing that will kill, a story or something like that is really stilted dialogue. Unfortunately, dialogue is one of the hardest things to write. And when you're reading through a script, if it's really stilted or unnatural, that's something that will turn an agent or a manager off when they're skimming through and reading. So, those are the things that I think you really have to pay attention to. And that's why these people like Vogler and Grisanti and John Truby are absolutely, like, amazing. Like, Robert McKee just put a book out on dialogue, and I read it, and I mean, this is my business, and I consider myself, like, pretty high up there, not Robert McKee standard, but, like, I know how to write dialogue, and I read the book, and I was, like, blown away. I mean, it's just so good to be reminded of this stuff. And I think people sometimes think that writing dialogue should be an innate ability. Like, we all talk, so we all should be able to write that. But when you translate that to a script or to a book, it just, it's hard. And so I think people, the best thing that they can do for themselves is just practice daily, read up on techniques and ideas from the experts, and just don't give up, and just keep working. And I think that that's like the best thing that you can do. And have someone read it before you send it to an agent or manager. Like, have it covered, or have Jen Grisanti or Lee or me or someone, take a look at it, because that really helps to have someone in the industry that knows what is people want, know what's out there, to make sure you're on the right track. I mean, I think feedback can be invaluable if you get it from the right source.
And Whitney, I think a lot of the times too, when you send a script to an agent or a manager, usually it's going to go to their assistant, right? It's going to have their assistant read it, and I think sometimes those assistants, can just get easily. I know I've heard different things. Sometimes they say they can easily just chuck your script, meaning if by the first page they can can see if. So that is right.
Oh, yeah. No, well, you know what the crazy thing is now for someone like me, because I am a small boutique management firm. It is me and one other person. So I'm obviously not Circle of Confusion. I'm not, Madhouse. I'm not, CAA. I'm not one of these big things. So I actually read the scripts myself. But what is true is this, and this is the truth, people, for those of you listening. The sad thing is this. It's if you're at one of those big houses, and this is the problem. If an assistant or a reader reads a script and gives it a consider, or, pushes it on to their boss, they spend, the assistant spends all weekend reading. And if they say consider, or that they're going to send it on to their boss, that means their boss, the manager itself, is going to take time out of their day or their weekend to read it. And if it sucks or it's awful and their assistant passed it on, guess what happens to that assistant?
They're gone.
They're fired. And so honestly, assistants, unless it is just absolutely cream of the crop amazing, what the sad reality is assistants are scared to pass it on unless they can just absolutely tell it's amazing, because they're afraid of their job. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I know that this is true and on certain levels at bigger firms. So you just have to be. So what I guess it's to say is it's just, that's how it is, unfortunately. And so for me, though, being a small manager, I'm willing to take risks on certain people and develop people. And that's why I think the cold query is a really scary thing, because managers and agents, oftentimes, it isn't always about the content that the writer has. It's about the writer themselves. They want to see, I have spidey senses. It's really weird. I can sit down with a person and usually know within less than 5 minutes if I'm going to work with them or not, just based on their personality. So that's why I tell people, if you can get in front of agents and managers, your chances skyrocket. Absolutely skyrocket, because they're going to be working with you. And so even though your content may not be the best, if they can tell that you are a go-getter and a talented person, they're probably going to be more willing to take a chance on you. And so that's why it's just downright scary to send something in cold, like CAA, Gersh, Circle, any of those big boys, just because that's how the ball rolls. So, but again, if you can meet those agents or managers that work at those places at industry events, then you're in a much, much better scenario.
Because it's I've had people on here before, and they would say, getting a manager, getting an agent, or even a manager more so than an agent, but it's about a relationship.
Yes.
Because you're going to have to be working for that person for months or years to come.
I always say it is totally like a marriage. And you know what the crazy thing is that I've talked to people before where I've been meeting them, kind of seeing if we're going to work together. And I've even had to be look, it's not even about your content. Because honestly, I feel like every agent and every manager kind of has their specialty or their niche where they feel most comfortable. And so mine at the current moment is television. I feel like I have much more connections and much more understanding of the TV world than I do of the film world. Do I know producers and people in the film world? Yes. But I just don't feel as comfortable in that space. So when someone comes to me and they ask me what I consider managing, but all they have is features, I sit there and I'm look, I'm just going to shoot straight with you. Your stuff is great, but honestly, I just may not be the right manager for you, only because I don't think I'm going to be able, that I have that I have the contacts to shop you in the right places. And I don't want to do a disservice to you knowing that I probably am not going to be the best fit. So I'm just honest with them and say, like, look, it's nothing about your ability or your talent. Like, I just can tell that we're not going to be a good fit. Or, like, I've told several people, like, you're great, but I'm just not passionate about this particular project. And to work together, like, you have to be in tandem, like, you have to be on the same page. You have to have a manager that's going to absolutely fight for you and advocate for you 100%. And so I just, I sometimes feel like it's just, it really is. It's like a weird form of dating in a way. Like, you really just have to make sure that you click and that you gel together, because you really are in this weird writing marriage, So I think that that's been an interesting thing I've learned, that I've turned people down who are really talented. I just know that I'm not the best fit for them. So it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, that actually ties in with some of the questions that we got, Whitney, and we actually had a pretty good amount of questions come in. If you don't mind, would you mind answering a few questions right now?
Sure, absolutely.
Actually, just tying in with what you just said, the first question is, do I need more than one script to approach a manager?
Yes, absolutely, you do. Generally speaking, when you come to a manager, Lee Jessup, this is one of the main nuggets that I learned from her back in the day. You really need what's called a writer's portfolio. And so generally what that entails is you really need to have, even if you're not a TV person, this is generally across the board, just what a screenwriter needs to have. You need to have a really strong TV pilot. You need to have a really strong spec pilot for something currently, or not spec pilot, but spec script for something currently on air. So I tell people, watch television, kind of pick your top 10, what I call a hit list of TV shows that you'd really love to write for. Then kind of knowing what your talent is, narrow that down to like 5, and then pick one of them and do a really good spec, because people at the networks and people, at the production companies want to see that you can mimic the tone and style of someone else's work. And even at the studios for features, because, they do work for hire for rewrites all the time for movies, but they want to keep it in kind of that same tone, so that they want to see that you can somewhat do that. And then also have a really, really strong feature. And if you have more than that, then that's great, but 3 is kind of the minimum. And then, people have come to me being like, well, I have 5 features and 3 TV pilots. What do I do? And I'm like, well, you probably have a pretty good indication in your gut which ones are are the strongest. Like, you need to take those, really, read through them again, polish them, rewrite them, and then use those to send out kind of as your portfolio. So absolutely, definitely more than one, definitely 1 TV pilot, 1 spec pilot for something currently on air in any form, like network, premium cable, or streaming, and then a really strong original feature that you've written.
And also, Whitney, I think I should probably mention too, and maybe I should have asked you this question before, but would you briefly just describe the difference between a manager and an agent? Because I sometimes think writers they always have an obsession about getting an agent when really they should probably get a manager. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. So for those of you listening, if you want, you can go to my website. I actually just did a 4-part series on Representation 101 explaining all of this. But to really do a short recap, so an agent is licensed by the state to negotiate and execute the sale of your work. So they come in when there's business to be done. So they are the ones to do that, and they usually take 10%. And so they really don't do... They may read your script, but they don't have the time and aren't going to take the time to read it, give notes, all of that. Agents generally tend to have anywhere from 30 to 50 clients on their roster, depending on where they are in the life of their kind of career. So they can take on a lot more people because they literally are just doing the business side. The one thing also you need to know is that agents are not legally allowed to produce anything. Their only job is executing and negotiating the contract for the sale. On the flip side, the manager is not allowed to quote unquote procure employment for their client. They're not allowed to, like, quote unquote, get you a job, like, doing anything per se, but they can help you sell individual scripts, but they cannot, like, be the ones, like, again, that's the agent's role. So what the manager does is the manager really is all about developing your career. They are the ones that usually go about helping you network and get meetings. Like, I just had a meeting with HBO and Hallmark a few weeks ago, and Netflix is up on the thing. They're the ones who are going to really organize and schedule those meetings for you and get you in the door a lot of times. Now, what's different, though, is a manager can produce, which in some senses is good because your manager is way more invested in that sense. So they also take 10% of whatever happens, generally because they're the ones doing the heavy lifting and the footwork of, like, helping you develop your concepts and reading and giving you notes and, like, really involved in the day-to-day. So yes, at the beginning of your career, if you can snag a manager, like, that's probably one of the best things that you can do. And a lot of people don't even have agents. They can, in lieu of an agent, they can just use an entertainment lawyer, which is just the same, an entertainment attorney, which is just the same thing. But what's great with an agent, I'll say this caveat, what's great with an agent, if you have an agent at CAA or one of the bigger firms, what's great is if they have someone else in their agency, like actresses and directors and all that, the great thing is they can package, material, and that will help. So it's like if you have your script, but then they have actresses A, B, and C at their firm that are wanting to attach, and then they also have this director, and then they can take it as one big package, that definitely, incentivizes the sale. So those are the two big things. Agents, licensed by the state, negotiate, execute the contracts. Manager is not allowed to do that, but they can produce, and they're the day-to-day development, getting you meetings, helping you network, helping you brand yourself, helping you write, just kind of grooming you for your career. So that's the short explanation. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that helped a lot. And that's great information, especially about packaging too. That's something also I hear. People will always talk about that, and I think a lot of times people sort of misconstrued that, and I think it's almost like the whole agent manager thing.
Yeah, and it can happen on the management side. I mean, I guess if you're management but I feel like, I hope that's right. Now I'm kind of second guessing myself. I've heard it happening more on the agency side than the management side that they package, but probably someone's going to write in and say I'm wrong. So I'll put that as a caveat that I'm not exactly sure, but in my brain at the moment, that's what it's telling me, but I may be wrong. So sorry if that's wrong information. I'll have to check, but I'm pretty sure it's more on the agency side than the management side is that they do that.
If anybody writes in, I'll just send it to you, Whitney. I'll be like, listen, Whitney, this guy said you're wrong.
Sorry, people. I'll buy you a coffee. I mean, I don't know what to say. So, so that's the differences between agents and managers. So, I think management, that's just why, I love it. I just love being a part of it's a sickness, really, loving to be a part of the process so much. People are like, every day, it's so funny. I'm just like, oh, why do I do this? But then when a breakthrough happens, I'm like, yes, this is the best. I mean, it's just like, it's such a crazy, crazy, crazy existence. So.
Yeah, it's like the plateaus and the hills. You know what I mean? It's like you get the highest of highs and lowest of lows.
Totally. But the thing is, and that's why, I guess that some of people could look on it as being shady, even though I don't think it's shady. That's why I haven't given up the consulting side of my business. Because, people come to me and they're like, I want to be managed, but I know that they're just not there yet. So I offer consulting services. And I always say, if you don't want to stay with me because, you think that's odd, I'm totally willing to, send people to several of my different colleagues. But the consulting side is just what I love so much too, because I love the people that need the expertise of an industry an industry expert or whatever. And I love being that person to help teach them and all that. So it's kind of a crazy thing, but I love doing both halves. So I feel like I can get away with it because my management, cluster is so small at the moment that I still can help the people that are the up-and-coming, aspiring writers. So I really still enjoy doing that so much, too.
Yeah, I can tell. You really enjoy doing it, and and it's needed. You have to have people that really enjoy this actually out there doing it.
It's true. I love it. I love it so much. And I think some people get really jaded and it gets tiresome, but I just find it all so fascinating. Like the way that the human mind works and the things that people can come up with. I just visibly people laugh at me because my face just lights up. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I'm like, even now I'm thinking of some of the stuff that some of my consulting clients are pitching at Austin. And I'm just like, I cannot wait for them to pitch it because I just get so excited for them because the ideas are so freaking, amazing. So we'll just see. It's a fun, exciting world.
I actually have a few other questions. I'm going to try to answer, try to ask these last two.
Okay.
So, Whitney, this is by @Joe Screenwriter, and Joe asked, "What are some of your thoughts on the query letter? As a Hollywood outsider with zero contacts, it seems like my only shot."
Yeah, and so I feel like I kind of addressed this a little bit earlier, but I'll expand on it. So the query is a really tough thing. Like, to him, I would specifically say, if you're a Hollywood outsider and you don't live in LA, I would really just make sure there is a process to the query. So I would make sure, and there's like an actual format to a query letter for film and TV. So I would look up or buy a book on how to specifically query your book or your film or your TV show. Second, if there's a specific place that you know that you want to send it, like I would research those agencies or those firms and check their submission requirements because oftentimes certain places are closed to unsolicited queries and it's referral only. So you need to check and make sure that they're open to unsolicited queries. And for someone who doesn't live in LA, that may be your only shot. But like I said, it is not super expensive to get to LA these days, I feel like. And it's just like if you can save up and come to one event or one kind of industry thing, it can. And again, I would probably say Great American Pitch Fest, something like that, is like one of the best things that you can invest in because you can get in front of like 100 management companies and producers who you can pitch to. And, it's just, it can change your life, like honestly. So in terms of a query, there's nothing wrong with them. I take unsolicited queries. You can submit to my website. I know that a few others take unsolicited queries, like maybe Circle of Confusion. But, the other thing I would do, honestly, for a person like that is reach out to people on Twitter and ask if they have managers or agents. And, because if you can get a referral, if you can send it to this is another way in, which is a good point. If you can find another writer who's currently represented and you send them your query first and have them look it over, and if they like it, they may be willing to pass it on to their agent or manager. And that's a way that it's not unsolicited anymore. So you feel like you have to find these backdoor ways in. So if he can find someone on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn that's currently a writer and currently repped, that might be a great way to go too if he can't get to LA.
That's a great point, Whitney. Twitter is a phenomenal tool, and I use it all the time. And I've always talked about the great uses of Twitter because almost everyone now is on Twitter.
Oh, Twitter is absolutely amazing. It's crazy to me, about how many people I've met on Twitter. I've gotten a few clients off of Twitter. It is insane. And I think for the screenwriting world, it really is the best social media platform for connecting, for sure, is Twitter, honestly. I think it is the top one, honestly. So that's what I would say is cold query, make sure that they take submissions. If not, come to an event, and if not, find another writer who is repped and see if they'll look at your stuff and check it out. Or the last one is if you can afford to hire one of the consultants, we all know people. And so if they come across something that's really amazing, they will be willing to pass it on as well. So, I think, and the other thing is contests. If you enter a contest and you place in a contest, all those lists go to agents and managers, the people that place. So that's another way to break in, for sure. And so that may be easier than querying, honestly. It's just, applying for entering into one of the many, many contests out there.
Yeah, that's something I've heard before too. Is they want to see what your writing can do up against other people's writing.
Yes.
And I've heard that where they want to see, hey, why aren't these people going in this competition? Why aren't they doing something why aren't they going that route? Is what I'm trying to say.
So that's another good way if you're not in Hollywood, because I know they take it doesn't matter where you live, you can always enter those contests for sure.
So, Whitney, we've been talking for about, 40 minutes now. So in closing, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss that you may have wanted to, or sort of, anything you wanted to say to put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
No, I mean, I think that I want to tell people that truly, if they set their minds out to do it, it's amazing that if they just keep at it, keep meeting people, keep writing, things can happen for you. The two things I say, the two P's of writing, are patience and persistence. So I think it just really is a journey. And if you're patient yet persistent and just keep at it, I truly believe things will happen for people. And I think it really is half relationships, half who you know, and half, craft and how well you write. So I just always tell people, always be nice to everybody. You meet, make an effort to be friends with them beyond just wanting to sell them or pitch them your idea. And just continue to really practice the craft of writing, and write because you love it, not because you want to make money off of it. I mean, I think some people, can make money off of it, and that's great, but it's just like, write because you love it, and that's what you really want to do. And I think the money will come if you go, look at it as a business and go about the right way of approaching it. So those are just kind of my last few nuggets of advice and encouragement. Just keep at it. Just patience and persistence is the key, and being nice to people, and it'll all hopefully fall into place. So.
Yeah, I like that last part too. Be nice to people, because they're, even on Twitter, Whitney, and I'm sure you get this all the time. I get a lot of people who immediately follow me, or they'll send me an email through my website, and right away they're asking something from me, like, "Hey, Dave, can you retweet this? Can you do this?" I'm like, I don't even know who you are. I don't even know what this movie is. And like, why don't you?
Yeah, and I'm telling you, what I really appreciate is even the writers that I know want something, but they actually just ask me out for coffee, and we go to coffee and just get to know each other before they make a certain ask or whatever. I mean, it really is about just getting to know other writers and building those relationships, and just acknowledging their successes before you start asking favors of them. I just think there's so much power in acknowledging success. Just to be like, Dave, you do a great job at podcasting. Thank you so much for what you put out there in the Twitter universe and social media at large, and start that conversation that way. And then maybe after a few days, it's been so great talking to you. I was just curious if, maybe we could do X, Y, and Z together, and have something to offer back to them. If you, like I said, if you're going to offer to ask somebody to do this, be like, hey, in return, I'm more than happy to do X, Y, and Z for you in the future. See if you can barter something. That makes it a lot more acceptable to me, that people would be willing if they know that you're also willing to give on your end. So I think it's definitely a give and take. And the writing community is such a great place. I just love it so much. So, I mean, that's what I always say, be nice to people. The first rule of everything. It will come back around in a great, great way if you can do that.
That's excellent advice, Whitney. Whitney, where can people find you at online?
They can find me at whitneydavisliterary.com, and then they can find me across all social media at wdavisliterary.com. At wdavisliterary. Yeah, the handle on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and everywhere else, I guess.
Yeah, and everyone, I'm going to link to that in the show notes. You can always find me at davebullis.com. The show notes will be on davebullis.com, and of course, follow me on Twitter at Dave_Bullis. Whitney Davis, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. It was an absolute blast.
Oh, I'm glad you had fun, because this is your first podcast, so I'm glad you had fun on it.
Yes, it was amazing. Thank you.
Anytime. Best of luck, Whitney. And, if you ever want to come back on the show, please just let me know. I'd be more than happy to have you back on.
I would love it. We'll have to figure something else to talk about, but for sure.
Oh, there's so much we could talk about.
Next time
honestly,
we can just do networking. I love talking about networking for writers. It's like one of my favorites. We should do that.
Oh, that sounds good, because I usually get asked about how I network when I go on other people's podcasts.
We should do it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we could do like a dual networking thing. It'd be pretty cool.
Totes. Let's do it. I'm down.
Whitney, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Anytime. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.